Oh, everything all good?
Everything's a lot better now.
Okay. Yeah, it was. I think I know what the issue is.
I'm in college internet right now, so my internet service is gonna be terrible. Yeah, sorry about
It's all good. No, I mean, look, it's going to be, it'll be an interesting podcast if we don't get through to each other, but it's not going to be much use for either of us, is it? So but I mean, we got some material here. We could probably do a set
that.
of what happened.
Maybe, yeah. Depends. But yeah, thank you for having. It's really a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I mean, thank you for deciding to spend like a couple of hours of your time with the podcast. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's. I mean, we were just saying before, like it's an interesting time to be in America at the moment, and challenging, would you say?
Definitely. Everything's been shut down. Places are opening back up, but we're still not near as functional as to be.
And
It's definitely weird.
and who do you support? Who's your party? Who are you voting for? No.
Uh, oh, Biden, definitely Biden. I can't quite explain how much I loathe Trump. Like I can't put it into words. Uh, so yeah, I'm front about who I'm for. It's really not as secretive as I'm not as secretive as some other people I know.
But when is the election as a whole? It's coming up soon, isn't it?
I believe it's November 3rd. I did early voting earlier this week. I think the actual election day is November 3rd. So I guess I will find out then.
Mm. I mean, what the thing that's said is that Trump didn't win the election. It was lost by Hillary, more or less. That's what people say.
I'd say that's accurate.
I mean, I mean, the first thing people said when Trump was voted, "Oh God, we're going to hear a lot of hacky Trump jokes."
They will
The thing that I find quite interesting is like in different parts of the UK, there's different sort of humor, different sort of characteristics. I noticed when I was over in America 3 years ago, each state seemed to have its own personality and character, and it also sort of translated in slight variances in the comedy as well. And like you're from the Atlantic comedy scene, is that right? Atlanta, which comedy?
yeah, ever. So this is all I know.
So did you say Denver or Atlanta?
Atlanta. I've never been outside of Georgia. So this is all I know right now.
Okay. And what did you notice being in sort of Atlanta, like are surrounding cities quite similar in their humor to Atlanta itself, or is there a slight variance?
I think so. From what I can gather, people take jokes about similar content. I don't know. But here at least, it's almost always drugs, sex, or politics. Those are the three big ones. Uh, Not to vary from that, and I think that's the case with a lot of places. But I can't verify that if that makes sense.
Okay. And what is your style of humor?
Drugs, sex, and politics. You got to do what works.
uh, what and to someone that wants to visit the Atlanta scene or wants to know about how the Atlanta comedy scene works, what sort of advice and how would you describe the structure of like progressing and growing in the Atlanta comedy scene?
So what you want to do is you want to go to literally every open mic possible. There are lists on Facebook and other websites on the internet of open mics and which nights they're available. You want to go to every single one of them. You want to meet people, want to make sure that you trade Instagrams or social medias or whatever. It's all about who you know. Um, I'd also recommend, this is kind of my thing, joining the Facebook group for your city's comedy.
And how does the sort of structure work? Does it go from like doing 5 spots, open spots, 10 spots, 20 spots, then feature, and then your headliner doing 45 minutes?
Oh, okay, that's what you meant. My bad. So from what I can gather, there are 15 to 30-minute spots, but those are fewer, more open mics. You know, the bucket spots and the list signups. I've only ever done, I think, 2 30-minute sets, and those are going far between. Most gigs I can find are 5-minute sets at bars and pubs and Punchline. Punchline is a sign up thing, but it's still a 5-minute thing. There are, yeah, minute sets, so it's a pretty steep climb, if that makes sense.
And steep climb. Oh, okay. So it's quite. What are the main clubs that you need to go to impress? Like, what are the big pro clubs? In London, you got the Comedy Store and Top Secret. They're the big cheeses.
So the big one, the big two, I'd say, are Punchline and Laughing Skull. Those are the two big ones that I'd say you want to save best middle and you gotta go out swinging. Those are the places you really want to hit hard. There are other smaller venues where you can test out your material, but those two big ones are where people tend to meet up.
Okay. And like, what is your sort of journey into comedy, and like, how did you start? And like, I'm sure there's a funny story that led you into stand up.
Not really. So I started doing improv in middle school, and I was encouraged by my Spanish teacher at the time to continue doing that. Uh, I've been doing improv for 5 or 6 years or so, and then I went to a comedy night Tuesday nights at Limerick John Minutes was it, and I kept doing it. That's really the whole story. It's not special at all, but
Mm. But what made you? Were you like the funny guy in your group, or what experiences led you into like deciding that comedy's for you?
uh,
What do you think's led you to it? I think a lot of comics, they say you get bullied, or you have some sort of tragic story, or like your friends say you're the funny one, or yeah, something's happened. There's a reason for why a lot of us choose to do this.
yeah. Uh, so a lot of it stems from. I mean, I've suffered with depression, anxiety my entire life. That's a huge part of it. Uh, my dad was kind of, I guess I can say, abusive when I was a kid. That's a part of it. I don't know. Anytime I can really hear from other people, I feel better, which is cheesy as hell, but I mean it's true. Uh, those are the big ones. My isn't all that tragic. Uh, it's just I found something and it makes me feel better about myself, so I kept doing it. You know.
You basically just describe like a job as a good sort of rent boy. Like you do comedy, but you make others happy, and if you've done good job, it makes you feel good.
I really wish there was more to it. Um, I don't know. It's very cliche, but there's something about being successful successful after a 5-minute set, knowing that people enjoyed your material, that just it's a high like nothing else. And for somebody like me who seeks validation from one all the time, every day, those stand-up routines are a quick way to get it, and they're almost always consistent. That's another reason.
Hmm. And one thing I mean, this is probably universal in every comedy scene. There's like unique stories that have happened. There's crazy things that have happened, and there's terrible experiences where we've learned something, and there's terrible experiences where we want to forget and never happened. And one of the most one of the most
Too
intriguing
many of those.
instances for my stand-up comedy thing, and it was quite a number of years ago. Some guy pissed into a beer can for his comedy set, and then he went and burnt a piece of paper whilst he was performing for no reason. And I had a week ago, I had 2 gigs where I bombed terribly. So I mean, like, tell us a bit about some stories that you've learned a lot in comedy and that have taught you the most, and like what's been a hilarious fucked up story that you never forget or use for material.
So there are two that come to mind. One of the guys still does it, so I'm not going to drop his name. Wouldn't have any material; he'd just scream like really loudly, and it was more of a rant, actually. And he always, when we do competitions, he'd always get first place because it was funnier than anything anybody had written. Another one, there was Roadkill Girl. Um, I don't remember the joke, but she said something about standing on the road after dark to find roadkill. And we all thought that was pretty weird, but when we tried to go up and talk to her afterwards, that's her whole personality was all it ever. And that's a big one I remember, particularly because it creeps me out.
Oh,
Those are the two those are the two big ones. The roadkill one is really depressing because I'm really trying and it's but, you know.
so I mean, so the other guy, what, he doesn't do any material, he just shouts at something and it makes people laugh.
Basically.
Oh, so he's a very good
Uh,
comic. He's
he doesn't use a microphone. The bar is kind of yeah. I don't know if he's a comic really, but I don't know why it's so funny. He's like a 50-year-old white guy. And he just fucking belts.
so
And it's
he's not the sort of person you expect to shout into the microphone. What he's the sort of person you expect to give tea, is it? What's he? So what? How does
yeah.
his sort of persona and how he comes across differ?
So we don't really know him. We've tried to get to know him in the past. My friend circle has, and he always leaves before we get the chance. But from again, he looks like just an old white guy. Like he'd be polite and like ask you how your day was, and then he gets up on stage and screams at you for 4.5 minutes. It's I can't explain why it's funny because it defies all logic, but I don't know you just have to be there, which is really not what you want to hear on a podcast. But I don't know.
Okay, that's cool. Whatever works for him, eh? He's making people laugh and he's funny, so that's the main thing, isn't it?
It's true. If you can make it work, anything is funny.
But if you don't make it work, you're gonna call 911 or something.
Oh yeah. Uh, there have been a couple of times where we've been concerned, where jokes would stretch too far into reality without like a punchline or any like usually you can tell, like there's a demeanor when somebody's kidding, and there have been a couple of cases where we just can't tell, and it's set off alarm bells, but nothing like calling the police. There are a couple, but they're very off color. Uh, Probably shouldn't be said, if that makes sense.
So when you go through like your process in comedy, how did you, I mean, in stand up, some of the friendships you build are probably the strongest you probably can ever have. And also in some, I want to ask you about how do you go about writing the material and developing it? So these are, so yeah, just give us a brief overview of them and tell us your story into them.
So everything I've ever done, I've never done by myself. And I'll explain on that a little bit. Um, Everybody knows that the funniest comedy stems from true stories. Anything grounded in reality that's the funniest thing you can write. And a lot of my writing is when I'm with my closest friends who know me the best, because at that point it's completely unfiltered. Uh, you get a lot of bullshit, but every now and then one of my friends will say something that's completely genius, and I'll just kind of take that uh, and then sense. And I've been doing this long enough to where like I've got a pretty good grasp on how like what works and what doesn't. But that's the gist of it is we all get really drunk and then just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. I don't know how many other comics do that, but
So are you more of a performer than necessarily a writer?
uh, I I would say I'm more of a writer because I have no performance. Uh, exactly how I am now. It's the same way I'm on stage. It's just when I'm writing jokes is writing anything. I struggle with that personally. I have been published. I've done poetry and things like that. But other than that, of stand up, I would be more of a performer. But anything else, I'm definitely better at writing.
And what but what is your sort of what's your process for writing? So you say that you just chat with your friend and you find something funny, but then how do you sort of like expand on that? Do you have like a set routine like Mark Wahlberg gets up at 3 a.m. in the morning and does all these other things? What is your like routine to make a joke a real sort of piece of art?
Okay, I guess I'm giving it all away. So a lot of we're partiers. That's kind of the crowd I come from. And the police. So there are three things people look for in a good story: consequences, uh, getting arrested, or love. Those are that everybody searches for. Really, the common tenets of misdirection, things like that. And try to story is good, you can focus more on delivery. A good example of this is John Mulaney and his stand-up. Uh, I believe it's titled on the album "The One Thing You Can't Replace," and that story itself is not necessarily funny, but it's the way you phrase it. The way phrases a bit where he says "like a liar," and that's not a punchline. There's no punchline in that, but it's the way he phrases it that gets an instant reaction from the audience. So I guess it's, if I had to describe it, it would be similar to that. That's kind of what I shoot for. Um, it's really weird because I can't. It's difficult to describe my writing process because I just kind of do it. Like every time I think of something even remotely humorous, it goes in my phone in the notes tab, and but it still seems to work. I don't know. Writing for me, there's not a there's not a set way to do it, and if I try to explain to you how I write, it wouldn't work for you necessarily, right? Every person has their own individual talents and strengths, and I think they need to focus on those rather than take what somebody else does. It can give you inspiration, but that's
Yes. Yeah.
inspiration is just inspiration.
So are you someone that's not a big fan of copycats?
Yeah. Thing I can't stand, and it's I can't stand Amy Schumer's. I feel like that's the best way to describe it. Like
Amy Schumer.
for anybody who's interested, you know, like I don't say that. There's a huge misconception that people we hate her because she steals other people's material, and that's something to say to anybody listening. If you plan on going to an open mic, write your own shit, because if you steal something, we're gonna know it, and then we'll blacklist you from everything. So that's just something I will put out there. Yeah, that's a huge pet peeve of mine.
And what do you make of like a style thief? Like someone that tries to imitate another comic or another individual's persona, traits, behavior, and tries to become another person rather than be themselves.
I wouldn't say I hate that as much, but there's something I know there's something to be said for forming your own personality, your own delivery style. That I think if you do your own stuff right, it's funnier than impersonating someone else. Like you can get up on stage and do a Bill Burr impression, but that doesn't mean it's going to be good. It can be a Bill Burr impression, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's funny. Be better off forming your own style. I know it's not inherently evil stealing another person's material, but it's not creative either. If that makes sense, and we tend to recognize it.
So, or what do you think of comedians who go, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? So in the UK, we get some comics who are big fans of American comedians, and they do this thing where they go, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Do you get that over
Uh,
in Atlanta?
I personally have never run into that, but I think I know what you're saying. I mean, there's something to be said for poking fun at a comedic tradition or a comedic norm in America. I don't know if you should focus your entire routine on that. You know, like maybe a gag once or twice. I've never experienced something like that personally. I don't remember, or at least nothing comes to mind where I've seen somebody do that. I think I do understand where you're coming from, though, in that regard.
What one thing that I've sort of found that's prevalent in all American in the three states that I did comedy in so Chicago, New York, and LA, is that they all, nearly all of them, followed the stream of consciousness kind of stand-up comedy, as opposed to like set up what's it called, one-liners or rule of three sort of thing. It was very sort of stream of consciousness based. And what do you think causes that sort of style to be prevalent in America? And what would you say are the different variances you tend to come across of that style?
That's a good question. So I don't know. There's something to be said for keeping it organic. There's misdirection is also prevalent in stream of consciousness. I don't know. I can't really differentiate between because I've only ever read like examples of rules of threes and things like that. Everything here is streaming consciousness because I believe that's what works. Our attention spans are so short. We don't want to devote too much time to a topic. The audience will lose interest rather quickly. Um, there's I don't know. It's very tricky to analyze. So yeah, God, I'm trying to put it into words because I'm thinking something. I guess the best way I can describe stream consciousness is I don't know, constantly changing. and that really works with American audiences. I don't know about all over the world, but particularly in Georgia, they all seem to follow that. I was here and then I was there, kind of really rapid fire style, and it works for us because our attention spans are so short. But yeah, I guess that's the big reason. Or yeah.
How does the stream of consciousness sort of remain sharp and brittle? Because effectively what it is a stream of consciousness. You get on a paper and you just write boom, 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 boom. How do you sort of compress that and make it appear natural and not appear like you're being a librarian on stage?
All about delivery. And so I've tried writing stream of consciousness before. Typically what I have to do is make it a joke, because otherwise it's just nonsense. And I realize that's not true stream of consciousness, but it's definitely interesting.
One question I want to ask you, who are your comic heroes and what do you like about their styles individually?
I guess probably the one who inspired me to was the first comedy album I listened to all the way through was his the top part, which I believe was his first one. Um, uh, there are a couple of reasons that one really got to me, particularly in similar life experiences with substance abuse, things like that. Kind of doing whatever you can to make people laugh, that sort of desperation that he talks about. Also in delivery styles. I don't know, there's something about the way he says things and his persona. It's kind of like a 30s radio announcer persona, and it really works in his favor. And I don't know, when I was listening to that, I could finally envision myself having something like that of my own. Other ones are Bo Burnham. Bo Burnham was a huge one. I'm grew at age. I was raised there, of course, because I'm only 20. But Bo Burnham was one of my biggest heroes when I was 8 and 9. I started on YouTube, which I think was every kid's dream, with the song "My Whole Family Thinks I'm Gay," which I thought was hilarious at 9. And then that gradually heavy subject matter. His last special, "Make Happy," was a direct criticism of seeking acceptance in the eyes of strangers, and why that's not necessarily a healthy thing to do. And I'd like to have those relevant because those are just fantastic.
Okay.
But those are the big two.
So Bo Burnham, and what's the other one? Missed it a bit.
John Lee.
John Lee. Okay. And how has with everything going on with the pandemic and all that, how would you say it's affected the whole Atlanta comedy scene? Like,
most open mic places have shut down or they've stopped. Originally, they were in restaurants and pubs, festivals. The only one I've been to in the last 3 months was Joe Pettis and Friends pop-up show in the Highlands. And that was really interesting because they had tried to social distance and there were only 6 people there total that were not performers.
okay.
And they'd switch out mics because of the pandemic. It was very weird. And I think that we're trying to do what we can to improvise and continue doing what we love. But given the circumstances, it's not necessarily wise, if that makes sense. I think we've recognized that, and until things get better, we've kind of chosen to put it on hold.
Okay. Uh, what what has been the hardest thing about your journey into stand-up and developing as a comedian?
So there are two things. Learning not to take everything personally is a huge one. To bomb. If you ever do stand up, you're going to have one or two crowds, probably more than that, definitely more than that, where you guys just aren't vibing. And you're going to get heckled, hell and back. And at that point, it's important to recognize that it's not you. It's probably your material, and that you can change it and do better next time. That's something great about stand up is
Okay.
another challenge for me was uh, getting up, and I'm attention, and that's because I enjoy a challenge is just working up. I guess the growing the balls to continue doing it. When I was 16, the first time I did it in Limerick Junction was a spur of the moment thing, and I don't think if I had thought about that any harder than I did at the time, I wouldn't have done it. It was just kind of, I guess, instinct, and it's something I have to continue to. I still get performance anxiety every time I do stand up. That's probably never going to go away. I do calm down. I have a set of breathing exercises, just mindfulness meditation exercises that I do to help out and calm my nerves. And it was a big challenge finding those combinations of and you know what works for me.
Yeah. Okay. And what has been the best thing about stand-up? Like, what has it given you that you can't take from anywhere else?
So there's something to be said for validation because I didn't get my parents uh, pretty shit if I could say that. There's something to be said for validation. I don't know, somebody telling you that you did a good job indirectly is a thing. It's also given me pretty much my best friend, one of my best friends, Spencer Vittich, was a comic that I met through comedy, and he's probably he's probably my best friend to date. And there's something to be said. I know other comedians are great, or becoming friends with other comedians is great because when you watch them perform, um, that's the real them. There's something about stand-up that's so vulnerable. It's easy to empathize with, if that makes sense, and it makes for some great friendships. And I don't think I could get that anywhere else.
And how does the sort of what do you feel of the so if you do a new material night in Atlanta, you do well and you keep doing well, how do you sort of go to what's the next level of clubs, next level up, and what's the next level above that? So does it go 5, 10, 15, 30, 15, 30 minutes? Is that the
Basically, those are different because you have to schedule them. You can't just show up and do them. So if anybody listening were looking to do 15 or 30-minute sets in Atlanta, I would email Ben at vortexcomedy.com. That's the big one, and then that will get you a potentially, if they like your tape, that's a tape, sort of an audition thing. If they like your tape, you'll get a 30 to 45-minute set at the Laughing Skull, which is a comedy club at the back of this restaurant called the Vortex in Midtown. Um, Another one is Punchline, and that one's a little weird because when I did it, I didn't have an email. I went in and talked to the owners personally, and then got them to give me a half hour, which is what was one of the weirder things because typically we communicate over email. It's not usual for us to go in person and say, "Hey, I'd like to be here," because it's just not. It's not efficient. you can't go that many places in one night. Email was definitely the way to go. Yeah, if you were looking to, if you'd have done well at open mics and were looking to increase the time slot, I email. I'd go to Punchline and talk to the owners, and I'd email Ben at vortexcomedy.com. There's the big two.
And in terms of sort of networking in the Atlanta scene, because there's a lot of that in London, like there's certain places before the pandemic hit where a lot of comedians hang out. What is the sort of main place that comedians in Atlanta like to hang out?
So there are two that come to mind. One of which is Limerick Junction, which is the first place I ever performed at. Limerick Junction is really interesting because it's not nearly as rigid as stand-up clubs. It's one of those places where like anything goes. Typically in Atlanta, or at least in the city, yeah, what you say, everything is very strict. With Limerick Junction, the great thing about it is that everything is going to perform our comics, and comics are in the audience every night. One of my good friends, Sam, I'm a comedy fest, Limerick Junction, and he's now pretty big. Another one I bet is Zach W, and I can't for the life of me remember his last name. Sorry, Zach. He's a big one in Atlanta. He's performed 45-minute sets at Laughing Skull. This is his career, and I also met him at Limerick Junction. Another one I'd recommend are pretty much any smaller spot you find in Atlanta. There are going to be comics there because they're all looking for a place to test out their material, and the best place to do that is often in front of other comics. It's the best way to receive valid criticism. And I met her at Noni's Bar and Grill, which is another 5-minute stand-up spot. Zach W and I have met a few times there. Pretty much those two places are the main hangouts, I'd say.
The names are what the names of them remind me?
Sorry, so Limerick Junction in Virginia Highlands, okay, and Noni's Bar and Grill, and also in Virginia Highlands, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. And the two other sort of questions I'd like to ask you are, or three other questions. What advice would you give to someone looking to do stand-up in Atlanta? And number two, what advice would you give to younger self? And what is a quote that you'd like to live the rest of your life by?
So the biggest advice I'd give to someone looking to get into stand-up, honestly, you just don't think about it too hard. People tend to have short memory spans. It really, the main three are write your own material, workshop it with people before you perform, so test audiences. I always go to family and friends. I even got the habit of DM, which is something I continue to do to get unapologetic responses to any of my writing. And that's been a huge help to me because either I'll get a like and a comment or I'll get a go kill yourself response. Either or is great. Yeah, write your own material, try to test it as much as possible, and keep doing open mics. Do as many as possible every night of the week. There are lists all over the internet. I found one on Tumblr when I first started, and that gave me a list of current open mic nights, what time there are. If I could give one piece of advice to myself, it would be also don't think about it too hard. I think I spent a lot of time analyzing and criticizing myself, even though I did a pretty decent job for someone who was new at it, at least when I was 16. Yeah, don't take it too hard. That's a big one. For a quote, there's one by George Carlin that's always stuck with me. And it was, I think it's of a comedian, define the line. where the line is drawn and deliberately cross it. And I try to think about that whenever I write. There's something to be said about being able to rationalize uh, smoking crack or something like that. If you're able to rationalize that and get the audience to empathize with you, that works really well. And I think that quote was the first time I ever thought about it from that angle.
Well, I just want to say, do you have anything that you would like to plug?
I guess my Instagram, in Castle. It's the_real_. You get it. And I'm the pasty white guy in the profile picture. I also have a YouTube channel that I'm trying to actually get up, and it's just Jason Castle Comedy. It should be pretty obvious because I'm also the pasty white guy in all the videos. So yeah, those are the main two. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast, and like send me all the links and all that so I can advertise it. And yeah, best of luck with everything. Take care.
Perfect. I was curious. When will I be able to listen to this, or do you know the release date yet? Or
I'm not sure because there's going to be a bit of editing that I'll need to do because there's been lots of stopping and thinking between that, and that's made it a bit harder. So I've got a backlog of 4 or 5 already. There's quite a few. I'm not too sure if I'll be honest with you, but I'm thinking probably maybe sort of late November.
that's perfect. No, I was just curious.
But yeah, and please let
If
people
you
know
ever need
about
anybody to come on again, or any help with anything, just shoot me a DM. Yeah, no, I've told all my friends and my family members that I'm coming on.
Cool.
I'll definitely plug into my Insta. I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Well, yeah, and bloody hope this virus goes soon and just like, yeah, hopefully I'll see you soon and take care.
Yeah, hopefully we all don't die. All right, have a good night, man.
Hopefully. Except the people I hate. No, I'm joking.